All right. So, welcome everyone here today. Very happy to have you here. I'm very proud to present the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan for Southwest Connecticut. My name is Nick Dostal. I'm Regional Planner here at Metropolitan Council of Governments. I'm joined by Cassidy Yates, who is our consultant from Weston and Sampson. Also offsite, we have Mike Towle, who's from the Western Connecticut Council of Governments. Who might be speaking later on. Um, so we can just get started with the presentation, and at the end of the whole thing, we'll have some questions and some time for Q&A. So for the agenda today, we're going to get started with just a bit of Climate 101, going over the reasons for a climate action plan. Next, we'll go into talking about the Climate Reduction Grant Program. Um, This is the culmination of 2 years of work, and this is the finale of the second phase. We'll go into the contents of the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, and within that, we'll look into the specific greenhouse gas reduction measures for each sector that we have included within the plan: transportation, buildings, electric power, waste, agriculture, and environmental protection. And then at the end, we'll talk next steps, additional resources that we've created to help you use the information that we've collected as part of this plan, and then have a broader discussion on what you would like to see or what you'd like to see improved, um, not just in this plan itself, but over the next 2 years as we continue to implement and work towards greater sustainability in our region. So just a little climate 101. We're looking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which are released from the combustion of fossil fuels, which are gradually warming our planet, and have a bunch of um, poor negative effects as well, in addition to contributing to climate change. Uh, we are in pursuit of a net zero emissions goal, which is making sure that the emissions that we emit are equal to the emissions that we remove through certain forms of carbon capture. This is usually through tree plantings and green infrastructure. Um, a lot of the measures that we are going to mention are looking to mitigate climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So actions and measures that reduce the total amount of emissions that we release into the air. Adaptation, as climate change is already in motion, we are looking to adjust our practices, our ways of life, in order to anticipate and uh, better handle the changes that come with climate uh, change. And then resilience, which is the ability of a system and its component parts to anticipate, absorb, accommodate, and recover from hazardous events. So going after that adaptation focus and looking to make sure that we are ready for whatever comes from climate change and that we can respond to it in a sustainable manner. So, a climate action plan is a comprehensive roadmap towards reducing GHG emissions, and this roadmap identifies the steps for getting towards an eventual net zero goal. And a climate action plan is needed because as climate change is already in motion, the number of days we can expect in our region to be above 90 degrees Fahrenheit is expected to quintuple from 5 to 25 days per year by 2050. We're getting 4 inches more of annual precipitation each year, and sea level rise is expected to rise by about 20 inches by 2050. So all of these are contributing to a region that is much different than what we currently live in, and we would like to preserve and enhance the places that the place we call home. So we would love to ensure that whatever we have here is sustainable and manageable for future generations. And so the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program was created by the Inflation Reduction Act and has been administered by the EPA. This provides grants to the metropolitan statistical areas around the country. Our metropolitan statistical area is the Bridgeport, Stanford, Norwalk, MSA. And under that guise, we are tasked with creating a climate action plan for our region. So the first phase of that was the priority climate action planning process, which focused on near-term changes and sort of low-hanging fruit that we can approach to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that priority climate action plan was released in March 2024. You can read that on our website, swctclimate.org. And the second half of this planning process is the comprehensive climate action plan, which is to build upon the greenhouse gas inventory, the measures, and the recommendations we made in the priority climate action plan, and sort of look at it from a more holistic lens, go a lot more into granular detail on where emissions are coming from, what the action should look like, and looking to create more long-lasting and duplicative actions and measures. So things that not only are things that we can do in the immediate term, but actions that we can take over the coming decade to reduce the impact of climate change. And so after we release the comprehensive climate action plan for the next 2 years, there is a status reporting period where we will measure and sort of assess the actions that have been taken as part of this plan. And then in July 2027, release an update, sort of where we are at from then on. So like I mentioned, the Priority Climate Action Plan was the first phase of this work. Working within that shorter time frame, we had about 6 months to prepare a plan of priority actions. And the actions that we had in the CCAP were originally derived from that PCAP, expanded upon, molded to better fit a longer term lens. And the second phase, the CCAP, like I mentioned, we conducted a much more thorough analysis and emissions projections. We've refined our actions. We provided much more opportunities for engagement. We made sure to go out into our communities, engage with our stakeholders, and get a much more thorough view of the issues that are facing our region in relation to climate, and better integrate with similar plans that are being developed across Connecticut and the country as a whole. So on our outreach and engagement, this started back from the PCAP. So we took the engagement that we did as part of the PCAP, which was the creation of a website. We had a PCAP survey. We conducted in-person open houses. And then for the CCAP, we had a new survey, which thank you everyone to answer to that survey. We had over several hundred respondents to that. We met with municipalities to hear their needs. Together with the other councils of government and metropolitan statistical areas in Connecticut, we hosted the Collective Climate Action Forum in Middletown back in last November. More recently, we hosted a series of in-person and virtual workshops at Sacred Heart University, looking to provide technical assistance to municipalities, organizations, and individuals in our region on a variety of sectors. So we looked at waste, buildings, transportation, and community aggregation as our topics. And those webinars are all recorded and available on our website if you would like to check them out later on. So I'll pass it on to Cassidy Yates, who will go over the what's in the actual climate action plan. What can you expect when you read it?
Great. Thanks, Nick. My name is Cassidy Yates. I'm a climate resilience and sustainability engineer with Weston and Sampson, and we've been supporting MetroCog and WestCog throughout this process of developing both the PCAP and the CCAP. And today we're going to talk in more depth about the CCAP and what you can expect to see in this document, which is now available for public comment on the website. So included in the CCAP document are greenhouse gas emissions inventory for 2021. We updated this from the PCAP to go into a little bit more depth and use more local data sources. So that way each individual community within our metro area can come out of this process having an individual an individual greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And we'll talk more about how to get that information toward the end of this presentation. We've also established emission reduction targets throughout this planning process. So we've committed the region to aligning with the state, since Connecticut already has emissions reduction targets set for 2030 and 2050. So we're showing that commitment through this plan. We, similar to the PCAP, included our co-pollutant inventory, so looking at not only greenhouse gas emissions, but other criteria air pollutants and hazardous air pollutants that come from some of those same sources, like the vehicles that we drive every day. This plan also delves into the authority to implement milestones and the timeline for each of the key measures that have been included. So not only are we identifying what action needs to be done, but the process that which we would go about in doing that. So some of the key partners and what their roles might be, including what the COGs are responsible for and what individual cities and towns would be able to do to make progress toward each of these actions. We also have sections in the CCAP on forecasting workforce needs. This was a requirement of the EPA, and we're using Department of Labor data here to identify which groups or categories of different jobs will be needed to help advance these actions. So that includes folks like electricians and plumbers and all the different career paths and careers out there that are needed to help advance this work. And then finally, we include some tracking metrics associated with each of the measures in the plan, and that'll really help us with the status reporting so we can look ahead to see what kind of progress we're making over time and how we continue to do so in the coming decades. On the right side of the screen, we have our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So you can see that buildings make up the largest portion of the inventory at 40%, followed by transportation with 36%. We have a section on the emissions inventory in the plan, so you can see more about those sources. And then for each sector, we also talk about some of those individual sources in more depth. And those reduction targets that I mentioned for 2030 and 2050 are also listed here and described in the plan. The plan is organized into chapters that reflect each of the sectors that we have measures developed for. So we have transportation, buildings, electric power, waste, agriculture, and environmental protection. So agriculture and environmental protection are grouped together in one sector and in one chapter in the plan. So I'll step through each of these chapters and identify the key measures and submeasures that are included in the plan. If you've been following along in our process closely, you may have seen these measures when we did some previous engagement where we reached out about feedback at that time. So these are kind of our finalized measures and have been submitted to EPA in our initial draft. And at this point have kind of all of those details that I just mentioned identified in the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. Transportation, we focus on two measures, including mode shift and clean mobility. So mode shift, that first one really being about reducing vehicle travel through using and prioritizing public transportation, active mobility such as walking and biking, and the infrastructure needed to support that. So we have identified submeasures, which include complete streets policies and planning, transportation demand management, mixed use and transit-oriented development, and public transit planning and technical support. So those are the key areas in which we could advance mode shift to reduce emissions from vehicle travel. And then with clean mobility, this is thinking about the vehicles that are on the road, since we know we can't remove all of them. How do we make sure that we're making the right choices and reducing our emissions from vehicle travel? So this is to advocate for electric vehicle legislation to improve affordability and accessibility to electric vehicles and charging infrastructure, and supporting municipalities with electric fleet vehicles, and how they plan for that infrastructure, especially with still use gas or diesel or other fuels, thinking about intelligent transportation systems or ITS, so that way we can reduce idling, and therefore reduce emissions associated with non-electric vehicles. Chapter 2 focuses on buildings, where we have 3 key measures. These include weatherizing building envelopes, decarbonizing building systems, and net zero ready new construction. So the first one focusing on energy efficiency and addressing health and safety barriers like asbestos, mold, kind of just generic building upgrades that may need to be done in order to reduce energy. And the COGS and communities can provide technical assistance, state programs that already exist. Similarly, with decarbonizing building systems, here would be retrofitting HVAC systems, to use efficient and electric fuel sources. So that way, as the grid becomes more saturated with renewables, we're prepared to take advantage of that and realize those emissions reduction savings. So again, this would probably come in the form of technical assistance, because there are programs that already exist in this. So making sure that folks are educated on how to use these programs and what options are available at all scales, whether that's residential, commercial, and for municipalities to also work to decarbonize their building systems. The third, net zero ready new construction, is thinking ahead with any buildings that have not been built yet. How do we ensure that these are not contributing further emissions and contributing further to climate change, by advocating to update state building codes and encouraging or enabling energy use reporting so we can understand the impact that these buildings, existing or new buildings, have. And then providing communities with technical assistance for zoning code updates so that they can use the tools they already have in their toolbox, such as zoning, to help reduce the impact of future new buildings. Then moving on to chapter 3, we have electric power, which includes 2 measures, one for renewable energy generation and storage, and one for community choice aggregation. The first focusing on deploying all sorts of renewable energy, such as community solar, distributed solar, energy storage projects, microgrids, geothermal, and more. And this again is looking at technical assistance, so how COGS and municipalities can support others or provide support to each other to be able to expand renewable energy generation and storage, and maximizing state funding opportunities for renewables. So really looking at what availability there is of funding and different financing options and how communities across this region can utilize that. With community choice aggregation, communities right now don't have the option to develop community choice aggregation programs, which are essentially using aggregated purchasing power to get better electricity rates and higher renewable energy content from electricity supply. State legislation is required to enable this. So at this point, we hope to see municipalities demonstrate support for adopting for passing that legislation to enable community choice aggregation, because this really could have a lot of potential to reduce emissions across the region and across the state. So the action we're proposing in the plan here is to assist municipalities in adopting local resolutions in support of that House bill that would enable community aggregation. And then moving into chapter 4 on waste, we have one measure here, which is all encompassing of waste diversion to expand materials management, diversion, and waste processing programs. those three submeasures we've included are advocating for waste reduction legislation. We know waste and how we manage our waste in Connecticut is a statewide issue, not just here in our region. So there's kind of action that can be taken at all levels of government. And then our second submeasure is to provide technical assistance for regional waste management practices. The COGS are in a great place to help facilitate some of the regional aspects of waste management. So that's something that we want to investigate further in the coming years, and identify areas where, for example, composting may make sense to do on a more of a regional scale. We already see it kind of on some town by town scales and at some smaller regional scales. So that's one example of how that can be expanded. And the third is to support with implementation of programs with state funding and other programs that already exist, with food waste being one of those areas where we think there's potential. And our last chapter, chapter 5, agriculture and environmental protection, the first being sustainable development in agriculture. And this includes leveraging nature-based strategies to sequester carbon from natural resources like forests and wetlands, and to consider how land development choices impact that, and thinking about sustainable agriculture. So really a lot packed into this measure, but we're thinking about our land and how we use that and how we can better manage it moving forward. The three submeasures here include supporting low impact development and incorporating this into planning and projects to enhance carbon sequestration. The second includes supporting conservation projects across the region. And as we know that we have limited forested areas across the region, as many of the parts of the region are developed. So making sure that we conserve the natural resources that we do have so they can continue to sequester carbon and support the net zero goals that we have will be critical in the coming decades. And then finally, supporting agriculture practices to reduce emissions from farm operations. Fertilizer is one emission source that was categorized and included in our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So there's strategies to reduce that. So we want to be able to support that sector as well. And the last measure is resilience hubs. So these are public serving facilities that can provide climate action education, serve as a resource during extreme hazard events such as extreme heat, extreme cold, when we have heating and cooling shelters, and really expanding those services beyond one-off events to serve as hubs. So this would be providing technical assistance for organizations and communities to implement more robust community resilience hubs. So with that, I'll just talk a little bit about some next steps and resources, and then we'll open up for discussion. I know we've got I'm seeing some messages come through in the chat as well, so we can address any of those. With the completed plan, our next steps would be to implement actions and those measures that we've included here. Many of those, are around technical assistance and require intergovernmental collaboration between the municipalities and COGS and other organizations. And we can advance these actions by collaborating and working together on existing projects and supporting new projects. So the plan has all those details for each of those measures. So I invite you to take a look at the plan in more depth. And we're also going to be developing additional resources, some of which are already available, including the sector workshop materials. So those recordings that Nick mentioned from each of those, such as the buildings and the waste sectors are available online already. And we're in the process of developing climate action playbooks. So these are a little bit more municipal focused. It has a lot of the same content that'll be included in the CCAP plan, but will be in a more digestible format where you can easily look at just a couple snippets of different pieces. So for example, if you're interested in a composting program, you can look at the waste sector playbook and get some more specific information that's really user friendly. And then we also have municipal greenhouse gas emissions inventory dashboards that we're developing, and we'll show that live as well. So this is a great place to be able to access the information for your particular community. So we have information around each of the sectors that have been inventoried, and total emissions for each community. So before we open up for questions, I will show the dashboard just so we have a chance to take a look at it. Stephanie, if you would like to talk through this, I can click around if you just let me know what you'd like to show.
Sure, I'm also happy to share my screen as well. Also, sorry if it's a little noisy around. But yeah, I will share my screen. It is not, I'm not allowed to share my screen. So if you want to change this permissions, or Cassie, if you want to play around with it.
Stephanie, you should be co-host now, so sorry about that.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So this is our, also sorry, I need a, oh, these bars always get in the way. So this is our greenhouse gas inventory dashboard that will, serve as a companion to the PCAP. So when you open it up, you see this map here, which right now it is showing total greenhouse gas emissions per capita. If you click this layer list here, we also have a bunch of different other layers, including gross emissions, net emissions, as well as emissions broken down by sector and by sector per capita. So for example, we have stationary buildings here. I will go back to per capita. So this dashboard is interactive. So if we were to click on a town, so I'm going to click on Bridgeport here, you will see that the figures and the graphs update. So you can see that right, our net emissions, we have 944K for Bridgeport, and then the graphs here on the side. So up top we have right broken down by sector, by percentages, and then below that we have the total emissions by sector, as well as carbon sequestration. Let's see, maybe we can get a better view. Yeah, if we the east in here, you can see our carbon sequestration number. And to go back to the initial view, or to zoom into a particular town, you can click on that there, and then this X, zoom back out, go back to the initial view. We also have this chart here, which shows emissions by sector for each municipality. This is a lot, so it allows you to zoom in, thankfully. And so this is a nice view. You get to see it really like broken down for each town. And this legend here is also interactive, so you can turn off and on certain sectors. So if we just want to see transportation, we could. Transportation, electric power, just like that. So yeah, the idea that this is simple to use, and it is not publicly available yet, but once it is, we can send out a link and it will be on our website as well.
Yep.
I'll pass it back off to you guys.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I really appreciate the great work that you, Mark, and the Weston Sampson team have done on that. I think this is something that, for all of you watching, could be a great resource for future grant applications. A very easy and seamless way to get your emissions information and to apply it to other endeavors that you go towards. So with that, we'll bring it back to the presentation and we'll do a little question and answer. If there's any questions that you may have about the CCAP or about the presentation, we'd love to hear it. If not, we have other questions that we'd like to ask you, so. Yeah, with that, please raise your hand if you'd like to ask something, and we'll call on you in order that you raise your hand. Yeah, or in the chat is fine, if you don't want to speak up.
While folks are thinking of questions, we'll mention that the public comment period is now open and we're requesting comments by email directly to Nick, and his email is listed here on the slide, and we can also put that in the chat between now and December 1st.
All right, if nobody has any direct comments on the CCAP or the presentation, we'd love to ask. We just presented the dashboard. We have municipal playbooks coming in, which sort of take the comprehensive climate action plan and put it into more bite-sized pieces so that people can better just navigate what's in the plan. We're wondering what other resources would be helpful for you as you look to apply the recommendations of the plan into practice.
Rob, I see your question in the chat. We do not have the GHG inventory tool publicly available just yet. We're working to finalize that, but it will be shortly, I expect in the month of December. But I'll be able to find it through the Southwest CT website.
And we have another comment from Peter Festa. Peter, thank you for joining us. It's from Third Act CT, looking to advance community choice aggregation. I'd like to coordinate with our efforts on it. Yeah, really appreciate you joining us today. Community choice aggregation, apart from being in the plan, is something that hasn't been explored too much in Connecticut yet. So we're looking to work with our municipalities, our other regions to get resolutions adopted and sort of signal to the legislature that we would like to have this be a possibility. For example, the town of Fairfield in our specific region recently passed a resolution. So there is some progress on that front. But hoping to see more and hoping to assist more municipalities if that's something that they're interested in doing. All right, does anyone have any more questions, comments? If not, as always, my email is there on the screen in the chat, and you can use the QR code or the link to go view the comprehensive climate action plan. We welcome any and all comments that you have on it. Would love to hear what you think. All right, hearing none. Thank you all very much for coming. I'll stop the recording.